After nearly half a century of shadow warfare, on April 13, 2024, Iran and Israel finally stepped into open conflict. It all began when Israel launched a deadly airstrike that destroyed the Iranian consulate building in Syria's capital, Damascus, killing 7 members of Iran's Revolutionary Guard. In retaliation, Iran unleashed a massive assault, launching over 300 drones and a mix of ballistic and cruise missiles to bombard Israel's military facilities. The most striking twist in this clash is, despite years of ignoring United Nations warnings, Israel suddenly turned to the UN Security Council, filing a complaint and urging the global body to condemn Iran's actions. Ironically, Iran has long been seen as one of Israel's greatest threats, a powerful rival even the United States views as a serious adversary. But how powerful is Iran really? Why does it inspire such fear? To understand that, we need to travel back through time to explore how Iran rose to become one of the most influential forces in global geopolitics, especially in the heart of the Middle East. Iran's official name is the Islamic Republic of Iran, but in the Western world many still call it Persia. Historically, Iran is home to one of the oldest and greatest civilizations on Earth. Dating back to around 4000 BCE, it's said that the people of Iran lived within the great civilization built by the Persians. According to German philosopher Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, Iran was the world's first true historical nation. Civilization in the land of Iran was already advanced in prehistoric times. This is proven by archaeological findings. Neanderthal-made artifacts, believed to be around 100,000 years old. From the Middle Paleolithic period, or the early part of the first millennium BCE, southwestern Iran is also part of the Fertile Crescent, the birthplace of early human agriculture. Many of the world's first crops were domesticated. Interestingly, the Persians themselves didn't appear in Iran until the Iron Age. Before that, the region was ruled and shaped by other tribes. One of the most notable was the Susa people, who inhabited the area as early as 4395 BC, predating even the Mesopotamian civilizations. Over time, the Susa evolved into what became known as the Elamite civilization, as the Iron Age unfolded and the Neo-Assyrian Empire began to rise. The Elamites were gradually driven out of their territories. Eventually, they merged with other tribes that had entered the Iranian plateau. These included the Medes, Persians, Parthians, Urartians, and several other peoples from the Steppes Pontic region and the Caspian area. Most of these groups lived under the dominance of the Assyrian Empire. Then, in 646 BCE, the Elamite civilization was crushed by the powerful Assyrian king Ashurbanipal. The remnants of the Elamite people were forced to flee and seek refuge in distant lands. Over time, after witnessing the brutal campaigns of the Assyrian kings, especially their relentless efforts to subjugate the Western Iranian tribes, these smaller nations began to unite. They gradually formed centralized states with one shared purpose: to rise together and bring down the mighty Neo-Assyrian Empire. In the 7th century BCE, the Medes finally won their independence from the Assyrian Empire. They then joined forces with the Babylonians to lay siege to Assyria, and their strategy worked. The Assyrian capital was destroyed, and the once mighty Neo-Assyrian Empire came crashing down. The Medes are remembered as the ones who laid the foundation for Iran as a nation and an empire. They are credited in history as the founders of the First Iranian Empire, one of the greatest powers of its time. Then came Cyrus the Great, also known as Cyrus II, who led the growing Iranian Empire. He united the Medes and the Persians into what would become the mighty Achaemenid Empire. With his wise and respectful rule, Cyrus earned the loyalty of his people and brought lasting stability to Persia. His leadership gave the Persian Empire its long-lasting strength. His son and successor, Cambyses II, chose a path of expansion. He set out to conquer ancient Egypt, the last remaining major power in the region. Cambyses succeeded, toppling Egypt's 26th dynasty and bringing it under Persian rule. But sadly, the heir of Cyrus the Great would not live long. Cambyses fell ill and died on his journey home from Egypt. According to accounts written by Herodotus, the ancient Greek historian, it is believed that Cambyses II died as a result of the wrath of Egypt's gods, angered by the fall of their nation to a foreign conqueror. After Cambyses' death, and during a brief period of political uncertainty, Darius I stepped forward to claim the throne. He declared his right to rule based on a direct bloodline from the Achaemenid royal family. Though his rise sparked rebellion, Darius swiftly crushed the uprisings and secured his power. Under his leadership, the empire's capital was moved to Susa, and he began construction of the grand city of Persepolis. One of his most ambitious projects was the creation of a canal connecting the Nile River to the Red Sea, a visionary move that would lay the foundation for what we now know as the Suez Canal. Darius oversaw remarkable advancements during his reign. These achievements are preserved in royal inscriptions written in Old Persian, carved in specially developed cuneiform script. Alongside the rule of Cyrus the Great, Darius' reign is considered one of the most powerful eras in Persian history. Under Darius, the Persian Empire reached its greatest extent, becoming the largest empire the world had ever seen. He ruled over vast territories spanning 3 continents: Europe, Asia, and Africa. The Persian Empire became the world's first true superpower, its legal foundations built upon unity, tolerance, and deep respect for different cultures and religions. But by the end of the 6th century BCE, Darius made the decision to launch military campaigns into parts of Europe beyond his empire's reach. Several nations, cities, and coastal regions of Greece fell under his control. When Athens, the heart of Greece, finally intervened, the Greco-Persian Wars erupted. This conflict would last through nearly half of the 5th century BCE and become one of the most significant wars in European history. Though the Persians suffered defeats, they managed to bring regions like Thrace and Macedonia back under their dominion. Darius' successor, Xerxes I, launched a second grand invasion of Greece. While many parts of mainland Greece were initially conquered, those victories didn't last. In the battles that followed, the Greek city-states struck back, forcing the Persian forces to retreat and lose much of their grip on Greek territories. The long war finally came to an end with the Peace of Callias in 449 BCE, decades later. After the death of Darius II from old age, Egypt rose in rebellion under the leadership of Amyrtaeus. The Egyptian rulers that followed successfully kept Persia at bay for years. It wasn't until the reign of Artaxerxes III that Persia finally reasserted its control over Egypt. But in the 4th century BCE, Persia's glory would meet its end. Alexander the Great defeated Darius III in a series of brutal battles, marking the fall of the Persian Empire and the beginning of Greek rule over Iran. After Alexander's death, his vast empire fractured, and one of his generals, Seleucus I Nikeda, founded the Seleucid Empire, spanning Iran, Mesopotamia, Syria, and Anatolia. The Seleucid Empire, however, lasted barely a century. Its power was eventually crushed and driven out of Iranian lands by the Parthian Empire, founded by the Arsacid dynasty. At first, the Parthians controlled the Iranian plateau and Mesopotamia by the end of the 3rd century BCE, but they later expanded their reach into eastern Arabia as well. The Parthians earned a reputation for being fierce and resilient. They became Rome's main rival in the east. Tensions escalated further when the Parthians blocked Roman expansion into eastern Anatolia. Their cavalry was especially feared, fast, agile, and deadly. Heavy armored units and lethal mounted archers made quick work of Rome's slower infantry-heavy legions. But despite their military strength, the Parthians struggled with siege warfare. Their difficulty in capturing fortified cities made it hard for them to hold on to newly conquered territories. The Parthian Empire endured for 5 centuries, far longer than many other empires in the East. It wasn't until 224 CE that they were overthrown by a rising Persian power under the newly formed Sasanian Empire. Under the leadership of its first emperor, Artasher I, began a major internal reform movement, both economically and militarily. Once again, Iran rose to become one of the most powerful forces on earth, rivaling both the Roman and Byzantine empires for over 400 years. The Sasanian Empire's territory at its peak was vast, covering what is now Iran, Iraq, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, Abkhazia, Dagestan, Israel, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, parts of Afghanistan, Turkey, Syria, Central Asia, Eastern Arabia, and parts of Egypt. After more than 6 centuries of conflict with Rome, Iran entered a new chapter. War between the Sasanian Empire and the Byzantine Roman Empire erupted across Anatolia, the Western Caucasus, Mesopotamia, Armenia, and the Levant. Eventually, a peace treaty was reached, bringing to an end the Roman-Persian Wars that had lasted over 700 years. With hostilities against Byzantium subsiding, Persia under the Sasanian dynasty reached the peak of its civilization. It became the last great Persian empire, one of immense influence and legacy. But a new era was dawning. The Persians, worn down by centuries of war, were unable to resist for long when Muslim forces invaded their territory. At the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah, present-day Al-Hila in Iraq, the Sasanian army faced a decisive defeat. This marked the Islamic conquest of Persia during Iran's medieval period, led by Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, following the end of internal Sasanian civil war. The Muslim victory brought about the fall of the Sasanian Empire and the decline of Zoroastrianism in Persia. Most of Iran's population gradually converted to Islam. Yet, many elements of Persian civilization were preserved and absorbed into the Islamic world. To this day, perspectives on this event remain deeply divided in Iran. Some see it as a blessing, the arrival of the true faith. Others view it as a shameful defeat, a foreign conquest that ended a great Persian legacy. After the fall of the Abbasid Caliphate, Turkish dynasties from Central Asia began to rule over Persia. These dynasties were originally military slaves, but due to the weakness of the caliphs, they eventually took control of the Abbasid administration. The collapse of Abbasid power led to the rise of several small governments across Iran, such as the Tahirids in Khorasan, the Saffarids in Sistan, and the Samanids in Bukhara. In 962, Alp Tegana, former military slave under the Samanids, seized Ghazna and established the Ghaznavid dynasty. Later, the Seljuk Turks of the Aguz tribe, hailing from the Amu-Darya region, launched invasions and took control of Persia. Interestingly, this conquest brought a wave of cultural and scientific revival under leaders like Tughril Beg and Shah Malik. But after Shah Malik's death, Persia again fragmented into small, scattered states. This continued until Genghis Khan led the Mongol invasion, not to rebuild Persia, as the Turks had attempted, but to destroy it. Cities were razed to the ground, and the damage to infrastructure, especially the irrigation systems, brought dramatic changes to settlement patterns. The invasion caused a massive population decline, especially among men, due to widespread massacres. During the Mongol rule in Iran, there were few signs of recovery, and those that did exist were nothing compared to the scale of destruction. It wasn't until Ghazan Khan came to power that things began to improve. With the help of his advisor, Rashid al-Din, he reformed the economy by reducing taxes, boosting agriculture, repairing irrigation systems, and enhancing trade with India and China. After Ghazan Khan's death, his nephew Abu Said succeeded him. But following Abu Said's death, Persia once again fractured into minor kingdoms. This lasted until Timur, a Turco-Mongol warlord, invaded Persia. Although his destruction wasn't as total as Genghis Khan's, he still inflicted serious damage on major cities like Isfahan and Shiraz. Following Timur's death, Persia became divided again. Although Mongol influence remained strong under the rule of the Uzbeks and Bayandar Turkmenizanto, the rise of the Safavid dynasty, which would eventually reunite Iran. Many historians consider the Safavid dynasty to be the force behind the creation of modern Iran. During this transitional period, Iran came to be known as the Great State of Iran. The Safavids ruled from 1501 to 1722 CE, bringing major changes that built on the post-Islamic era transformations most significantly. The establishment of 12 Shia Islam as the official state religion. This moment was one of the most pivotal turning points in Islamic history. Under Safavid rule, Iran emerged as one of the great Islamic gunpowder empires, meaning it possessed advanced military power backed by modern weaponry. Iran competed directly with the Ottoman Empire and the Mughal Empire, its main rivals during this time. After the fall of the Safavids, Iran came under the control of the Afarid dynasty, then the Zand, and later the Qajar dynasty. In the 17th century, European powers began to explore and exert influence over Iran. This growing interference led to Iran losing several territories. By the 19th century, a new era began with the Iranian Constitutional Revolution, which introduced a constitutional monarchy. While the Shah retained power, A new parliament called the Majlis was officially established on October 7, 1906. Not long after, the discovery of crude oil in Kazakhstan drew the attention of Britain and Russia. Both powers competed fiercely to expand their influence, seeking control over Iran's oil and even attempting to divide the country for their own gain. At the time, Iran was ruled by the weak Kr dynasty. Seeing an opportunity, Reza Pahlavi led a revolt and successfully crowned himself as the new Shah of Iran, establishing the Pahlavi dynasty. Before becoming a Shah, King Reza Shah was a skilled minister of war. He was known for his remarkable intelligence and earned deep respect, even from his superiors. At the time, Iran was ruled by the young and inexperienced Ahmad Shah of the Covert dynasty, whose inability to govern led to widespread corruption and chaos. Public frustration mounted, and the people called for Reza, then still a minister, to take over. At first, Reza was appointed as prime minister, but by 1925, he was officially crowned as Shah, replacing Ahmad Shah. During his reign, Reza Shah established an authoritarian regime built on nationalism, militarism, secularism, and anti-communism. These pillars were enforced through strict censorship and intense state propaganda. Reza Shah launched widespread reforms revamping Iran's armed forces, government administration, and national finances. Iranian society became divided in its views. To some, Reza Shah was a hero. To others, a tyrant. Under his rule, Iran became a nation of strict law and order. He instilled military-style discipline, centralized authority, and pushed forward modernization, building schools, railways, buses, cinemas, radio networks, and telephone lines. His efforts to modernize Iran spanned nearly 16 years, from 1925 to 1941. But to many Iranians, these reforms felt too rushed and superficial, seen as mere cover-ups for oppression, corruption, and heavy taxation. His state operated more like a police regime, using force to control the people. Many of his new laws clashed with Islamic customs and angered the religious community. Mosques were forced to install chairs. Men were required to dress in Western styles, specifically wearing flat-brimmed hats. Women were encouraged to remove the hijab. Most controversially, men and women were allowed to gather freely in public spaces. These modernizing efforts triggered unrest. In 1935, tensions exploded into open revolt when villagers gathered in the Imam Reza Mosque in Mashhad and protested. They chanted, "Reza is the new Yazid," a name reviled in Islam as a tyrant who broke his promises and lived unfit for a leader of the faithful. The revolt turned violent. Dozens were killed and hundreds were injured as the army was sent in to crush the uprising. By the time World War II broke out, Iran had already fallen under the influence of Britain and Russia. Though Iran officially claimed neutrality, the Allies viewed the country as a vital oil reserve. Before Reza Shah came to power, the British had hoped to turn Iran into their puppet state, but his rise blocked those plans. When war broke out, the Allies demanded that Reza Shah expel German forces from Iran. He refused. In response, British and Soviet troops launched a joint invasion known as the Anglo-Soviet invasion of Iran and forced Reza Shah to abdicate. His son Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was installed as the new Shah. But unlike his father, who was both feared and respected, Mohammad Reza was widely seen as a puppet of the British. His rule only deepened the people's resentment. Iranian Revolution, from monarchy to Islamic Republic. The chaos under Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi's rule eventually sparked what would become the Iranian Revolution, or, as it's also known, the Islamic Revolution. This uprising transformed Iran from an absolute monarchy under the Shah into an Islamic republic led by Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, the central figure of the revolution and the founding father of the new Iran. The revolution began in January 1978 with mass protests and demonstrations, and it wouldn't officially end until December 1979. Nearly 2 years of unrest passed before a new theocratic constitution was approved, centering the nation's identity around divine authority. Ayatollah Khomeini was appointed supreme leader. Meanwhile, Mohammad Reza pulled from power the country in January 1979 after massive nationwide strikes and demonstrations had paralyzed Iran. Only after his departure did Khomeini return from exile on February 1, 1979, greeted by millions. Under his leadership, Iran was officially declared the Islamic Republic of Iran on April 1, 1979. After a nationwide referendum showed overwhelming support for the new regime. This new ideology was deeply pro-people, nationalist, and above all, pro-Shia. The new constitution was founded on the concept of wilayat al-faqih, a theory proposed by Khomeini, stating that the Muslim community needs constant religious guidance from a qualified Islamic jurist or a council of jurists. Khomeini assumed this role until his death in 1989. During his leadership, Iran's booming capitalist economy was replaced with people-centered Islamic policies. Industries were nationalized, schools and laws were Islamized, and Western cultural influences were banned. Iran also severed ties with Israel and entered a brutal, costly war with Iraq that lasted 8 years, from 1980 to August 1988. Between 1982 and 1983, Khomeini's government managed to recover Iran's collapsing economy, military, and state apparatus. Widespread protests and uprisings ranging from secularists and leftists to traditionalist Muslims were crushed by the new regime. Many political opponents were executed in the process. There were also armed uprisings by Marxist guerrillas and federalist groups in Khuzestan, Gunbadi Qaboos. These rebellions began in April 1979. With some lasting months and others like the Kurdish uprising led by the Democratic Party of Iranian Kurdish, dragging on until 1983 and leaving around 10,000 dead. It became one of the bloodiest conflicts of the post-revolution era. One of the most defining and long-lasting events in the early years of the Islamic Republic was the Iran hostage crisis. After the ousted Shah was granted entry into the United States for cancer treatment, Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. November 4, 1979, they claimed the embassy was a den of spies and took 52 Americans hostage for a staggering 444 days. The U.S. military attempted a rescue operation, but it failed. In Iran, the hostage-taking became wildly popular. Thousands rallied in support of the students. The event catapulted Khomeini to near-mythic status and strengthened his anti-American base. It was during this time that Khomeini famously dubbed the United States the Great Satan. In the U.S., however, the hostage crisis was seen as a blatant violation of international law, which traditionally allows for the expulsion of diplomats in times of conflict, but never hostage-taking. The crisis ignited a powerful anti-Iran sentiment across America. To this day, relations between the two nations remain hostile. American sanctions which followed have weighed heavily on Iran's economy for decades. The hostage crisis didn't just cripple Iran's economy, it created a storm of political and social unrest. Saddam Hussein, then the ruler of Iraq, saw this chaos as an opportunity. With Iran's military weakened by internal strife and the fall of the respected Shah Reza, Saddam believed it was the perfect moment to strike. Before the revolution, Iran's military had been feared across the region, but now it was fractured. Saddam, driven by ambition, aimed to become the new power in the Middle East. He sought greater access to the Persian Gulf and hoped to reclaim territories once disputed during the Shah's rule. His eyes were fixed on Khuzestan, a province rich in oil and populated by a large Arab community. Confident and boastful, Saddam claimed Iraqi forces could reach Tehran in just 3 days. On September 22, 1980, Iraqi ground troops stormed Khuzestan and the Iran-Iraq War officially began. The attack stunned Khomeini and the Iranian people, who were still reeling from the revolution. Despite Iraq's early dominance, Iran's battered military eventually pushed back and forced Iraqi troops to retreat by early 1982. Instead of ending the war, combed by the idea of exporting the Islamic Revolution to Shia majority, Iraq chose to continue. What could have ended early dragged on for 6 more brutal years. The war devastated both nations, finally concluding in 1988 with a UN-brokered ceasefire, but the conflict had already crossed every line. Iraq used chemical weapons against Iran's human wave attacks, violating international law. While Iran suffered immense casualties, mates ranged from 500,000 to 1 million lives lost, to never resorted to chemical warfare. Throughout the war, Iraq received massive support from global powers. Egypt, Gulf Arab states, the Soviet Union, the US, France, Germany, the UK, Brazil, and China. Even as China also sold weapons to Iran. International observers later confirmed Saddam's use of chemical weapons. After the ceasefire, Iran turned inward once again. On July 19, 1988, Iran began a secretive wave of mass executions targeting political prisoners, an event now remembered as the 1988 Iran massacre. The regime's main targets were members of the People's Mujahideen of Iran and leftist groups such as the Tudeh Party, Communist Party. Estimates of the death toll range from 1,400 to 30,000. Despite this dark chapter, Iran's political structure seemed to stabilize under Khomeini. But as his health declined, he quietly appointed 25 trusted members to draft constitutional reforms. In 1989, they selected then-President Ali Khamenei as Iran's new supreme leader, ensuring a smooth transition of power. Though Khamenei lacked Khomeini's charisma, he had powerful allies, especially among the military and Iran's wealthy religious foundations. Under his rule, the Islamic Republic began to resemble an oligarchy of clerics more than a pure theocracy. Khomeini's successor as president was Ali Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani, a pragmatic conservative who served 2 terms. Rafsanjani focused on rebuilding Iran's war-torn economy and infrastructure. Its biggest challenge: low global oil prices, which strained Iran's main source of revenue. He reduced military spending, controlled population growth, and normalized ties with neighboring countries, most notably Saudi Arabia. During the 1991 Gulf War, he kept Iran neutral, prioritizing stability over politics. Rafsanjani also eased anti-American rhetoric, allowing U.S. aid planes and Iraqi refugees into Iran during the conflict. His leadership brought a period of relative calm to Iran, but that calm would not last. In 1997, a reformist named Mohammad Khatami won the presidency, promising liberal change. His vision clashed with increasingly conservative clerics. Tensions exploded in July 1999 when massive student-led protests erupted in Tehran. The demonstrations lasted a week before police and pro-government groups crushed them violently. In a surprising twist, Khatami won re-election in 2001, but by then, the conservative establishment had grown stronger. They blocked reform by shutting down liberal newspapers and disqualifying pro-reform candidates from parliament. As hope dimmed, Iran's younger generation slowly turned away from politics, disillusioned, unheard, and unsure of their future. Despite enduring decades of internal conflict, few can deny Iran's place as one of the most powerful nations in the Middle East. It is a key player in nearly every major conflict across the region, from Syria and Lebanon to Yemen's influence, weaving deeply through alliances, ideology, and military support. This dominance isn't new. Iran, once the heart of ancient Persian empires that stretched across 3 continents, carries within its borders a long and complex legacy of power. That legacy continues, now shaped through one of the largest and most formidable militaries in the region. According to Global Firepower, a respected military analytics organization, Iran ranks 14th out of 145 countries in terms of military strength. Its nearly perfect score stems from its vast manpower, financial backing, logistics, and favorable geography. In a region rife with tension, Iran stands firm. Its military budget consistently among the highest in the Middle East. Iran's armed forces are massive, more than 580,000 active personnel and 200,000 trained reserves, divided between the regular army and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, a powerful parallel force loyal directly to the supreme leader. What makes Iran particularly formidable, however, is not just manpower but technology. Iran has developed one of the largest arsenals of ballistic missiles and drones in the Middle East. Its weapons include cruise missiles, anti-ship projectiles, and long-range ballistic missiles that can strike targets over 2,000 kilometers away. These weapons are not just for show. Some have been deployed in active conflict zones, and even sold to powers like Russia, allegedly for use in Ukraine. All of this has been achieved despite the weight of crippling international sanctions. Had Iran not faced decades of restrictions from the West, particularly the United States, its military might could have grown even more potent. Yet Iran has remained resolutely independent, rejecting foreign interference in its internal affairs or its regional activities. Since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Iran has opposed any Western military presence in the Middle East, especially from the US. It has consistently criticized interventions by foreign powers, even as it quietly expands its own reach by supporting Shiite militias and proxy groups across the region. One of Iran's clearest rivalries is with Israel, the once allies during the reign of the pro-Western Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, when Iran became the second Muslim country to recognize Israel. The revolution reversed that relationship overnight. Nahuna Khomani, Iran denounced Israel as an illegitimate occupier, calling it the Little Satan, while referring to its ally, the United States, as the Great Satan. Iranian leadership believes that Israel has no rightful place in the region, especially due to its treatment of the Palestinian people. Still, Iran has rarely launched direct attacks on Israel until recently. A retaliatory strike, believed to be in response to an airstrike on Tehran, marked a dramatic shift in policy. Although Iran often voices support for Palestinian resistance, this particular confrontation with Israel was not directly linked to Gaza or Palestine, but rather seen as a response to an attack on Iranian soil. Today, Iran's influence reaches far beyond its borders, largely through what analysts call the Axis of Resistance, a network of armed groups in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, all reportedly receiving varying degrees of support from Tehran. Tensions across the Middle East remain high. Military experts warn that one miscalculated strike could ignite a broader conflict. Both sides appear to be holding back, aware that the next escalation may be too great to contain.